indestructible. Once released, it will multiply the power beyond our calculations. It perhaps will never die. To this virus, we have given a highly unscientific name, but one which describes it perfectly. The Satan bug.
So from the pen of Alistair Maclean and directed by John Sturges, who was fresh off mega hit The Great Escape, 1965's biological weapon thriller The Satan Bug probably should be more well known than it is. It's kind of buried beneath films like Andromeda Strain and more recently movies like Outbreak and Contagion, which no doubt received rewatches as the COVID-19 pandemic began to grip the headlines. Now, being an Alistair Maclean thriller, you'd think this film maybe has more in common with a Connery-era Bond movie than it does an out-and-out scientific medical drama. And admittedly, in comparison to Bond, there's a noticeable lack of action on shore through most of the film. There's none of the token car chases or gunfights, etc. Instead, the film relies more on dialogue and plot to keep the tension-high story moving forwards. And to be fair, this is more than sufficient. Let's take a look. So in a top secret research lab somewhere in remote California, two men have broken into one of the laboratories and killed the security officer. The general in charge calls Lee Barrett, his son-in-law and recently fired security guard at the lab, to help him investigate.
That was removed from Station 3 a few hours ago. It doesn't matter how at the moment. You know what it is?
Now, Barrett suspects an inside job and is pretty horrified to discover that several flasks containing deadly viruses have been stolen, including the newly refined Satan bug, a virus powerful enough to eradicate all life on Earth. Now, it's not long before a threat is sent to the government demanding that the research base be closed down, and to prove their threat, the mysterious thieves let off a flask in Florida, apparently killing hundreds of people. It's only a matter of time before the next attack is made, and there are seemingly no clues to go on.
Well, it's happened, Lee. Key West, Florida, about an hour and a half ago. We have helicopters in the area. One report says there was a small explosion. Then everyone downwind started dying. We've closed down all the news media, but we won't be able to keep it quiet for long.
So The Satan Bug, the movie, anyway, written by Maclean, but under his pseudonym Ian Stewart, to whom this film is credited, he undergoes a location change from the book's UK setting to America, which is fine considering that this was a Hollywood production, but it works especially well here because it provides the movie with some kind of cool Area 51 style vibes. Now, as I mentioned, The Satan Bug isn't an out-and-out action extravaganza. It's the quote-unquote thinking man's bioweapon movie, with John Sturges, who was originally criticised for delivering such a slow-paced film, actually doing quite good work with this material. It's very talky, there's no doubt about that, with moments of action turning up sporadically, similar in a way to his work on Bad Day at Black Rock and his late 60s space disaster flick Marooned. But what I'm a fan of, especially with this film, is that it moves from kind of virus heist movie to conspiracy/investigation movie, as Barrett is aided by his old girlfriend Anne, played by Anne Francis, as bodies start mounting up in excellent desert locations. My personal criticism of the movie is that it sags a little bit in its middle stretch. The plot starts to get a little bit complicated, and I'm not too proud to admit that I got a bit lost at one point myself, maybe just before the villain/villains were revealed.
What the hell are you doing here? Usually make a habit of hanging around people's swimming pools?
I do when I see that.
Speaking of which, there are some cloudy, almost Bond villain level motives from our bad guy here, and there is a nice twist/villain reveal. The Satan Bug isn't a big budget star-studded disaster movie, the like of which the 70s would perfect. The majority of its cast here were plucked from TV, including its main star George Maharis, who'd just finished a run on early 60s show Route 66. Anne Francis was fresh off The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and The Alfred Hitchcock Hour, and even Dana Andrews as General Williams was just finishing a 6-year hiatus in television. And I'm sure that will have led to a relatively cheap cast, but I'm sure that freed up the finances for some excellent location work, a Dodgers Stadium set piece springing to mind. And some realistically foreboding sets also. Station 3's biological research station sits just on the right side of science fact, although it does have some of the most lacklustre security for a facility housing what is essentially the planet's deadliest weapon. So speaking of our heroes, I do like that Anne Francis is given a little bit to do here. She's not just that kind of damsel in distress. Her character's pretty much the equal of Barrett, able to at least attempt to fight her way out and figure her way out of situations. In all honesty, he's not the most heroic of protagonists, though. But I think that's okay. There's too many movies where normal folk all of a sudden seem to have military combat training when put in difficult situations. Here our heroes are continually interrupted and captured by the villains and have to constantly figure their way out.
Handle that gently. Those misses were intentional.
Stand exactly where you are, man.
A standout scene where the pair are locked in a gas station with a bottle of the evil virus is one of my favourite parts of the whole movie. Now, I do admit I think Sturges was probably torn between whether this was going to be a serious sermon on the dangers of bioweapons or a Hitchcockian chase across California, complete with a virus MacGuffin. In the end, he's made neither and both, in a way. Now, I'm sure I read the original idea for the climax here was a mass evacuation, complete with death and hysteria, but ultimately the movie cheaps out a little bit towards its end. It does suggest a mass evacuation in parts, but we barely get a glimpse at that. Instead, we do get a vertigo-inducing helicopter showdown leading to the climax, which was probably easier on the purse strings. Now, I do have to give a quick mention to the soundtrack here by Jerry Goldsmith. It's suitably eerie and does really tie in with the kind of sparse desert locations and threat of annihilation. Now, this film's a worthy addition to the contagious disease as weapon of mass destruction subgenre that unfortunately used to be science fiction but now seems to be part of everyday life. Go check it out.
Some scientists thought that the H-bomb would start a chain reaction that would blow up the world, but it didn't. Nobody really knows about this. Theoretically, yes. But it hasn't yet been put to the real test.